Hey, yeah, it is Monday, the 21st of October, 2024, and what can I say? I have a hankering to talk about some more Laserdiscs. This time we're doing Caddyshack, the 1980 classic comedy film, and Caddyshack II, the rather less beloved 1988 sequel. So both films were distributed by Warner Brothers, and so these are both Laserdiscs from Warner Home Video. Caddyshack was directed by Harold Ramis. Caddyshack 2 was directed by Alan Arkush. Both films had very different receptions upon release, and today both films have very different, very contrasting reputations. They're both golf-themed comedies. I've never played a game of golf in my life. I don't think I've ever watched a full game of golf in my entire life, but I do really enjoy. Well, I enjoy one of these movies. This is an American Laserdisc of Caddyshack that was released by Warner Home Video in 1983. So the it says 1981 on the back, but that's the copyright of the content summary, the blurb, and all that stuff. This was from 1983. Apart from really liking the movie, this is. I really do like these Warner Home Video Laserdisc releases of the 1980s that have that sort of uniform design. I've got quite a few of these already. I've looked at quite a few in previous videos. It sort of preserves this edition of Caddyshack as to be expected. It preserves the theatrical, the poster from the theatrical run of the film, although it's somewhat cropped. There is the poster for the movie. It has much more of the country club building in the background, and I think it's got like the giant gopher, sort of an abstract representation of the gopher, sort of like looming over it. But you don't really see that here. But this is still pretty good. So it's got. I like the fact that the artwork. You know, we've got the photographs to use. We've got Bill Murray, we've got Chevy Chase, Ted Knight, and Rodney Dangerfield. This is a pretty good looking Laserdisc. I do remember the very first time I saw Caddyshack. It was late. It was either late 1998 or early 1999. It was the Australian summer holidays. I was in between high school and my first year of university, and Caddyshack was on late one night. And for whatever reason, I'd never actually seen the film before, which was kind of surprising because I'd seen I'd seen a lot of films with the guys that were in it, so I was aware of what Caddyshack was, but I just never saw it until that point. Yes, I really do like Caddyshack. I mean, it's kind of, it has a pretty unassailable reputation these days as a comedy classic. Although the film, when it was released, it kind of took a while for its reputation to catch on. So it was released in 1980. It was directed by Harold Ramis. It was his debut as a director. It was written by Ramis, Brian Doyle Murray, and Douglas Kenny. Brian Doyle Murray is the older brother of Bill Murray. Douglas Kenny was the one of the founders of National Lampoon magazine. And I think Ramis and Kenny were both writers on National Lampoon's Animal House in 1978, and which the movie that kind of invented, or at least popularized, the sort of lowbrow frat house, slobs versus snobs comedy films, which became very prevalent all throughout the 1980s. So Caddyshack, it did pretty well box office wise. I think it was deemed to be a disappointment only in as much as it didn't do as well as Animal House, but it still did pretty well. I mean, it did well enough for Warner's to commission a sequel. But anyway, so the film is obviously. It's about the shenanigans that go on at the Bushwood Country Club. It's fairly well known that the original draft of the script sort of focused more on the teenagers, the caddies, and then I don't know if it was during the writing or during filming or whatever. Like the older actors sort of took over. So you had you've got Chevy Chase as sort of millionaire playboy Ty Webb. You've got Bill Murray as Carl Spackler, the sort of crazy groundskeeper. Rodney Dangerfield as Al Cervic, the kind of slobby, nouveau riche property developer. They're all really funny. I think my favorite performance actually comes from Ted Knight, who plays the crusty antagonist, Judge Smales. He's really, really funny. So the movie kind of caught these guys all at different sort of different points of their career. So Ted Knight was obviously a big star from television, from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, as Ted Baxter. Chevy Chase had come off television success as well at Saturday Night Live, and he'd made a few films, some of which were okay, some of which weren't very good, but this kind of consolidated his rise as a A-list comedy star. Rodney Dangerfield was a well-known stand-up comedian. He'd done a lot of talk show appearances, and he was well-known on the stand-up circuit. This was kind of his first starring role in a motion picture, and this kind of set him up as a viable film star as well. And Bill Murray, I think this was 1980, so Bill Murray was just coming off the end of his tenure in Saturday Night Live. He left in 1980. And this was kind of the beginning of Bill Murray as a film star as well. So there's lots of really memorable scenes in this film. Lot of great lines. It's very, very quotable. You still see lines. You hear lines from this and see memes and stuff from this movie. It has endured, and deservedly so. It's a really funny movie. The film also stars Michael O'Keefe as Danny Noonan, the caddy, who's probably the closest thing to a protagonist in this film, in as much as the narrative central arc belongs to him, even though it is pretty much an ensemble film. Cindy Morgan is in this as well as Lacey Underall, the kind of blonde, sultry, temptress character. Her other best-known role is as the female lead in Tron in 1982. Caddyshack was executive produced by John Peters, and Caddyshack II was produced by John Peters and Peter Guber. Those guys they were like heavyweight Hollywood producers in the 1980s. They were involved in the making of the 1989 Batman film. Kenny Loggins contributed some original songs to Caddyshack. I'm not a huge fan of Kenny Loggins. I can't say I'm a big fan, but I do actually like the songs he contributed to this. It's one of those things. I don't know if it was ever meant seriously, but apparently Harold Ramis wanted to get Pink Floyd to do the score or do songs for this movie, which I don't think that was ever seriously on the cards. I think maybe he was just saying that to maybe John Peters asked who should we get to do the music, and maybe Harold Ramis was sort of throwing that as a suggestion to see if he would bite. But I don't think Pink Floyd were ever engaged to work on this film. This was made in 1980, so they would have been touring the Wall at the time. But interestingly, I guess Caddyshack and Pink Floyd's The Wall, they do both have an arsehole judge in their respective stories. I think Doug Kenny, the co-writer, producer of Caddyshack, he was disappointed with the film's reception critically and commercially. Unfortunately, he never lived to see the film's reputation and fairly beloved status rise. He died not long after the completion of the release of the film. He fell off a cliff in Hawaii. I don't know if it's ever been conclusively proved whether it was deliberate or accidental, but it was a shame. I do remember an anecdote that John Landis told regarding Caddyshack. So John Landis directed National Lampoon's Animal House, that was co-written by Harold Ramis, and Harold Ramis was a little disappointed with some of the changes that John Landis made in the process of translating the script to an actual filmed motion picture. And then what happened was Harold Ramis directed Caddyshack, and then according to John Landis, Harold Ramis sort of phoned Landis and kind of apologized because he could see that having now directed a film himself, he sort of realized that all the compromises and things you have to do to make the film to make it workable, and he sort of realized that was, now that he directed a film himself, he could sort of see that why John Landis had to make changes to Animal House. But anyway, yeah, I think this film is kind of I think cocaine is inextricable from its the legendary stories around its production. I mean, I think a lot of the cast and crew were sort of on various substances. In fact, I'm not entirely sure if it's true, but Doug Kenny actually appears in a very minor role in this film. And I think during the dinner scene in the country club, like in the background, you can actually see him doing a line off a table of cocaine. So I have to go back and check that whether that's true or not. There is also, I think a lot of people, kind of think that the stuff with the gopher, there's the kind of the cartooniest aspect of this movie is the subplot involving the gopher that's causing property damage to the club, and Bill Murray's character has to stop the gopher, and they use an animatronic like a puppet gopher, and it's kind of silly. I don't mind it. Some people don't really like it, but I think it's okay. It's actually I think it's sort of good to have a sort of a wacky through line, to balance out all the verbal hijinks that goes on for the better part of the film. So Caddyshack did well enough that Warner Brothers wanted to get a sequel up and running, which brings us to Caddyshack II. This is an American LaserDisc from Warner Home Video from 1989. The film is from 1988. So yeah, Caddyshack II. I got to be honest, Caddyshack 2 is really bad. It's rock bottom. It's one of the worst films I've ever seen. Certainly one of the worst sequels ever made. And I think the story behind the film's production is a lot more interesting and entertaining than anything that's on screen. So what actually happened was, so Rodney Dangerfield, was a breakout star from Caddyshack 1, and then he made some other films that were successful, including Back to School in 1986. So the idea was that there would be a Caddyshack 2 for Rodney Dangerfield to star in. Rodney Dangerfield agreed to be in it. And then Harold Ramis, sort of against his better judgment, was sort of brought in to write it. And then there was trouble between Rodney Dangerfield and the production. He decided he didn't want to do it anymore, so he quit. I think Warner's actually sued him for breach of contract. But anyway, Caddyshack 2 only came about because it was supposed to be a Rodney Dangerfield vehicle. Once it became clear he wasn't going to be involved, there wasn't really any reason to proceed with the movie. But the problem was, Warner's had already spent millions of dollars in pre-production, and they weren't going to give up on it. So they were still going to make Caddyshack. They were still going to make Caddyshack 2. And Harold Ramis according to Harold Ramis, he tried to sort of pull out of it, but he was kind of convinced to stay on. So they got Jackie Mason to star in this movie instead. So yeah, one of the problems with Caddyshack 2 is it doesn't really feel like a sequel. It feels like an off-brand knockoff. Like, if you can imagine, if Canon Films were to make a Caddyshack ripoff, it would be kind of like Caddyshack 2. So so all the main characters in this, they're all sort of like fill-in characters, replacing characters from the first movie. So we've got Jackie Mason instead of Rodney Dangerfield. We've got Robert Stack instead of Ted Knight. We've got Dan Aykroyd instead of Bill Murray. We've got Jonathan Silverman instead of Michael O'Keefe. And we've got Chevy Chase standing in for Chevy Chase because, Chevy was the only cast member that agreed to return for this one. Even though it's basically a glorified cameo, like he's not really very good in this. He's really half-assing it. And then like towards the end of the film, like in the last act, when there's like a big caddy tournament, like Chevy just basically announces his disinterest in things, and he just walks off. It's like it's really, really strange to watch. It's like he was just giving up and walking out on the film on camera, and they just had to incorporate it into the film. But yeah, this is pretty bad stuff. Like Jackie Mason is really terrible in this as the lead. He's just not really likable at all. He's very shticky. He's just not. I just don't find him entertaining in this at all. Dan Aykroyd, like, I love Dan Aykroyd from SNL, Blues Brothers, Ghostbusters, Trading Places. He's done a lot of great stuff. He's really actively annoying in this. It's actually one of the worst performances I've ever seen. He plays this kind of crazy survivalist military guy who has to kill the gopher, and he speaks in this really high-pitched voice. Is very annoying, and like it's just a lot of mugging. It's just not funny at all. Randy Quaid's in this. He he was actually playing a part that was supposed to be played by Sam Kinison. Sam Kinison and Rodney Dangerfield worked together in Back to School, and when Rodney Dangerfield was going to make Caddyshack 2, Sam Kinison was going to be in it, and then when Rodney walked, Sam Kinison went as well, and they lumped in Randy Quaid to take over for him. Diane Cannon is in this as well. Robert Stack is okay. I mean, he's not as good as Ted Knight in the first film, but he does okay as the sort of, cantankerous, snobby, villain arsehole of the film. And the Gopher is back. I think he's the Gopher. I think he actually talks. He verbalizes in this as well. So they sort of give. I mean, as a lot of people don't really find the Gopher that funny in Caddyshack 1. I don't mind him, but I'm not as enamored with the Gopher in Caddyshack 2. So yeah, this is a really terrible film. It didn't do very well at all box office wise. It's kind of like watching it. It's like, you're at a family gathering and it's like you're just depressed because of all the people that aren't there for whatever reason, and you sort of, it's almost funereally unfunny. This film, it's really bad, and no surprises. There was no Caddyshack 3 after this one. This film well and truly, poisoned the well, salted the earth, burnt the bridges, whatever other destructive analogies you want to throw at it. This film did it. The film was directed by Alan Arkush, who's a director that I really like. He came up through the ranks of the Roger Corman's studio, and he worked a lot with Joe Dante. He co-directed Hollywood Boulevard, which was Joe Dante's first credit as a film director. And Alan Arkush, he made some pretty good movies. He directed Rock and Roll High School from 1979, the comedy musical with the Ramones. That's a pretty good movie. And he's done some other good stuff. I think he sort of went into television, and then he was kind of lured into directing Caddyshack 2 when the production had become so catastrophic. I do recommend checking out the Wikipedia article on Caddyshack 2, because there's a lot of stuff about the very chaotic pre-production and production of this film. Like Chevy Chase was apparently really horrible to Alan Arkush, unfortunately, and there's a lot of stuff with Jackie Mason and everything. And then there's a lot of like the critical response to this film was almost unanimously, quite venomous and deservedly so. The publicity for this film promised that the Shack is back, but really I think the only thing I like about this movie is the song Nobody's Fool by Kenny Loggins. They got Kenny Loggins to come back and contribute a song, as he'd done. He'd contributed a couple of songs for Caddyshack 1. That's pretty much the only thing I like about this movie. That being said, I did actually pay money to acquire a vintage LaserDisc copy of this film. So, what does that say? What does that say about me? I do remember the very first time I saw Caddyshack 2. It was on television. And then I think years later, I got a VHS and a DVD copy, because I'm a completist or a sadomasochist or something. But yeah. So I suppose we can say it's a shame that Doug Kenny died before Caddyshack's reputation really took off. But we can also say at least he didn't live to see Caddyshack 2. I'm also privileged to own several VHS copies of Caddyshack 1 and 2. This is a 1981 Australian VHS edition of Caddyshack from Warner Home Video. It has that uniform Warner Home Video design that was in use for their releases back in the day. So you've got I really like these old Warner cassettes. So they have fairly detailed blurbs, and they've got like a long cast list on the back. So yeah, this is pretty good. I bought this online locally, and it didn't actually cost very much. I was quite happy to get it. This is a 1989 Australian VHS edition of Caddyshack 2. So we can sort of see Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd's names are kind of highlighted at the bottom there. Yeah, so again, this is what Warner Home Video used to do. They would have these fairly lengthy blurbs that sort of they didn't just describe the movie; they also actually go into a little bit of detail describing the production of the film, and actually have like interview excerpts with, I think, Jackie Mason at least. Yeah, this is the very first official edition of Caddyshack I ever owned. This is a 1992 Australian VHS for the retail market that was released by Warner Home Video. As we can see, that's very different artwork from the theatrical release poster and the artwork that was used for the LaserDisc and VHS releases. I actually kind of like that artwork actually. Yeah, they've actually put Cindy Morgan on the front. Yeah, so yep, pretty good. This is an item I actually recently required. I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, I think having Caddyshack 2 on VHS and DVD and LaserDisc, I don't know if I necessarily needed another VHS edition, but anyway, this is an Australian VHS edition from Warner Home Video that was released in the year 2000. So this is for the retail market. And yeah, so it's actually, we can sort of see that they've sort of pared down the blurb. It's actually much less explanatory than the blurb that was in the rental edition. But yeah, I would venture to say that this would have been the last official VHS release of Caddyshack 2 in Australia, at least. I don't imagine there would have been any further editions. I first heard of Caddyshack 2 before I'd even heard of Caddyshack 1. I remember I first became aware of Caddyshack 2 in it was November 1990, and the reason I remember that is because I recorded The Empire Strikes Back off television on a Friday night, but I was going to I was going to stay over with a friend. It was his birthday, so I wasn't able to cut out the commercial breaks. So I taped the movie with all the commercial breaks, the ad breaks, and one of the adverts was for Channel 9 advertising the network television premiere of Caddyshack 2. So this is a couple of years after it had played in the cinemas. And so what happened was, this was years before I had an official VHS copy of The Empire Strikes Back, so that whenever I wanted to watch The Empire Strikes Back, which was actually quite often, it was this copy that I taped off television. I never actually got an official VHS version of The Empire Strikes Back until the whole Star Wars trilogy was re-released in 1995. I got a set of the videos in Christmas of that year. So anyway, every time I watched The Empire Strikes Back, I saw that advert for Caddyshack 2, which kind of amused me. I always watched it, didn't fast forward it, and then I sort of worked backwards from that and became familiar with. I realized obviously if there was a Caddyshack 2, there was a Caddyshack 1. But yeah, that's how it started. But anyway, I do have the cassette. I do have that advert. The quality is a little bit shoddy because it's a 34-year-old video cassette that was played quite often back in the day. But anyway, here it is.
Something is out there. Something that won't go away. And now it's back. The first time on television.
It's that crazy goer in Caddyshack 2. Starring Dan Aykroyd. And funny man Chevy Chase.
Want to play Trap the Clam?
So get ready for the game of your life. For the first time on television. Sunday 8:30 on Channel 9, the hilarious Caddyshack 2.
So there you have it. I want to thank Bill Murray and Rodney Dangerfield for not appearing in Caddyshack 2. I want to thank Doug Kenny and Ted Knight for having the decorum to die before Caddyshack 2 was made. Harold Ramis, the great Harold Ramis, rest in peace. You shouldn't have agreed to be involved with Caddyshack 2, but I guess, these things happen. And Chevy Chase, may God have mercy on your soul.